Good morning. I want to talk about another modern God. I want to talk about the God of education today. And by education, I mean schooling. Um, Mass education in classes aimed at gaining qualifications or skills for future life. And this kind of schooled education is massively important today, where I think it has reached the point that it has become effectively one of the modern pantheon of gods. It began, of course, centuries ago in the medieval schools, which were designed to turn out people they called clerks, people skilled in mathematics and writing, because they were needed for helping the aristocrats and the church to have their experts in reading and writing and math skills. The aristocrats themselves, of course, concentrated on military matters or farming matters, and the church needed clergy for at least some of its jobs. An amazing number of medieval priests couldn't read or write, they just learnt the liturgy off by heart. Well, as well as the medieval clerical schools, there were also in the time of the Renaissance military schools or military colleges, as firearms came in, as the drilling of men became more important, organised armies. There was a need for an officer class, a corps of officers who were trained up in military schools. In England in particular, after the Reformation, there was a need for educating the clerks and the accountants of late medieval Britain. And so we had our public schools and our grammar schools founded in the time of the Tudors. And then later on, the tradition of public schools contained both what you might call the military ethical side and the practical clerical side. There was a famous saying, I can't remember who said it, that the Battle of Waterloo was really won on the playing fields of Eton and Harrow. So the idea of schooling is not new. What is new is this massive worldwide system of schooling, training the modern workforce, training them in the technical and apparently meritocratic system of bureaucracy, which rules over both public and private enterprise. And in these bureaucracies, people enter after they've been thoroughly schooled. In fact, I would say most large organisations themselves have the characteristic of schools to a large extent. So I think the modern view of education or schooling is that it's a way of socialising people into a condition where they can survive or hopefully thrive even in the unnatural environment of the modern workplace. But why do I call schooling or education a modern god? Well, because of its size and influence and its cost, and the fact that people believe in it. Let's think of the size of the modern education system. It consumes massive resources, doesn't it? And the buildings are a bit of a clue. Everywhere you go, you'll bump into nursery schools, primary schools, secondary schools, tertiary education colleges, universities, all the different ways of schooling people. I was in Seville in Spain, which is a surviving medieval city. And everywhere you turn in Seville, there is a religious building. There is a church, a monastery, a nunnery, or something else. If you go to a modern city like my hometown of Southampton, it's like that, but the buildings are not religious, they're educational. Southampton is full of schools, colleges, universities. In fact, many more than when I was a young boy going to school in Southampton. So it's a massive can we call it an industry? Secondly, influence. Parents obsess these days, don't they, about how to get their kids into good schools. It's one of the commonest reasons for moving house. Every property website has to have information on the local schools to be taken seriously. Many job opportunities today are tied to having a decent degree or A-levels. Someone told me recently he won't bother even calling for interview someone who hasn't got a decent degree. And these days the influence of schools on people's life prospects, on where they live, is added to because schools are expected to do a lot of what used to be called parenting. Sexual and social mores are more and more taught as part of the curriculum. Life skills of every sort, not just reading, writing and arithmetic. So schools have more and more influence if you take in universities, as I do, as a kind of school. And then there's the cost, isn't there? One mark of a religion is that it expects its followers to make sacrifices. And people do. People take on large debts to get their children through higher education. Any child going to sixth form, I say child, any adult going to sixth form or tertiary education is going to forego many years of salary income and work experience for the sake of getting what they call their education. I've known many people forego marriage for many years until they've completed their, not just their first, but sometimes their second degree. I've known married couples put off children for many years until they've completed their education. And it's one reason for the plummeting fertility rate in many countries. There is a connection between how thoroughly schooled a population is and how low its birth rate is. Now, from a health point of view, the best time to have children is in your late teens or in your 20s. But nevertheless, people are prepared to risk all the complications involved in having an older father, mother, and the child's complications being born at a later date. So there's the cost of education: economic, social, material. And another mark of a religion is the faith that people put in it. It seems to me that in the modern world the answer to almost every problem is supposed to be more education, and people by that mean more schooling. Every government report on any problem calls for more education as one of its conclusions. Old people who listen to Radio 4, like me, are used to almost every report ending with a need to raise awareness by having more what? More education about whatever the subject is. Ironically, we're entering an age, I believe, of massive unemployment and economic turmoil, but every year the system turns up millions of fresh graduates from the far end of the schooling system. Okay, well, I don't believe in education in that sense very much at all, as you've probably gathered. But how does a Christian react? Well, some courageous and hard-working people react by homeschooling. But you need to have two gifted parents with the time and the ability, really, to do homeschooling. And it's a challenge for well-resourced people who generally have to be from the middle or upper classes. Not everyone can do that, and it's a very interesting question whether you even should. But every parent can help their children nevertheless, even though the children to some extent will be in this schooling system. We are, after all, living in the information age. Almost everything that had to be learnt at school at one time can be learnt in other ways now. There is one sense in which all of those buildings and all of those institutions are becoming redundant. Now, always in Christianity there has been a high level of literacy because the Bible has a key position in the Christian faith. And we should make sure that our children are basically literate, whatever the school they go to. But more importantly, we mustn't let the education system take over the parenting role. We have to shape the character and outlook of our children as far as we can. I know that no one can do that much, but as far as we can, that's our responsibility. And let's remember that the Christian faith is always countercultural. Whatever the modern gods of our time are, we don't believe in them. We serve another God. We pray to another Father. I'm going to finish by quoting the Bible. This is about money in the first instance, but I think it applies to all the modern gods and not just money. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. The Pharisees, who loved money, heard all this and were sneering at Jesus. He said to them, "You're the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your hearts. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight." And I want to emphasize that last sentence. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight. Strong language. Not everyone does value money. Some people value culture and the arts above almost everything else. Some people value political matters and political courses above everything else. That's where their faith is. And some people value education in a similar way. And the people who value education probably would be tempted to sneer at someone like myself, dismissing schooling as being of relatively small value. Well, these are the modern gods, and it seems to me that we need to value something else. We need to value God and His kingdom. We need to value the Christian virtues and practice them. And I think we need to disbelieve in the modern gods. And schooling, which is sometimes miscalled education, is one of the modern gods that I think we should show a certain amount of disrespect to. Anyway, I hope that provokes some thoughts, and be blessed, and see you soon. Bye for now.